The fallen angel, created in the year 1847 by the French master Alexandre Cabanel, is one of the most sublime and unsettling representations of the 19th century, a work that combines the majesty of academicism with the spiritual depth of the darkest romanticism. Cabanel, born in 1823 in Montpellier, was barely a young man of 24 when he conceived this monumental piece during his stay in Rome as a fellow of the prestigious Prix de Rome, a prize that distinguished the most promising artists of France and allowed them to study at the Villa Medici under the tutelage of the Academy. There, surrounded by the golden light of the Mediterranean and the ruins of antiquity, Cabanel developed a sensibility that would lead him to master the balance between the technical perfection of classical art and the emotional charge that characterized the romantic spirit of his time. In that context, the fallen angel was born an oil painting on canvas, measuring approximately 120 by 196 centimeters, and which today is preserved in the Musée Fabre in Montpellier, guarded as one of the most important treasures of 19th century French painting. In the scene, the fallen angel is represented in the instant after his expulsion from heaven, the moment when the rebellion has ended and only the silence of exile remains. The figure lies on a gray rock, nude, with wings cast down and the body tense from a mixture of pride and humiliation. His right arm partially covers his face, but it does not manage to conceal entirely the tear that slides down his cheek, a tear that shines with the light of the heaven he has lost. It is the most human gesture of the angel, and perhaps the most devastating. His gaze, directed upward, expresses not remorse but defiance, as if divine punishment had not destroyed his inner fire. Cabanel achieves in this gesture a synthesis of opposing forces, the pure beauty of the celestial being and the shadow of the pride that condemns him. There is no monstrosity nor deformity in his fall, but rather an almost divine perfection that contradicts the idea of evil. In that contrast is hidden the true symbolic power of the work. Evil does not always disguise itself as ugliness. Sometimes it inhabits beauty itself. Cabanel's technical treatment is impeccable and meticulous. The anatomy of the angel recalls classical Greek sculptures, with defined muscles and ideal proportions that reflect the artist's academic training. However, the tension of the posture and the expression of the face add an emotion that breaks with the usual serenity of academic art. The wings, which begin in a luminous white and end in a deep black, symbolize the transition from heavenly purity toward the darkness of the fall. The sky blue background, where small angelic figures that ascend can be distinguished, contrasts with the central figure halted on earth, creating a sensation of spiritual distance and eternal separation. That dual composition, the heaven that recedes and the angel who remains alone, embodies the drama of irreparable loss, of glory turned into solitude. When the work was presented at the Paris Salon, it provoked both admiration and discomfort. The more conservative academic critics considered the subject too provocative, for it represented a fallen angel with a sensual beauty that bordered on the human. Some branded it excessively romantic, others blasphemous, and there were those who accused Cabanel of turning the devil into an object of desire. But that mixture of rejection and fascination was precisely what consecrated his name. The fallen angel not only displayed impeccable technical skill but also conceptual boldness, transforming a religious myth into a universal metaphor about the human condition. The artist did not paint an infernal being, but a spirit in conflict, a symbol of the inner fall that we all experience when pride separates us from the divine. The symbolism of the work is deep and multifaceted. The tear represents the boundary between hubris and redemption. The black wings, the weight of forbidden knowledge. The rock, the harshness of punishment. And the luminous sky, the memory of the lost paradise. The entire painting breathes an atmosphere of sacred melancholy, where beauty is not salvation but condemnation. The choice of a male body, young and perfect, was not accidental. In an era when the male nude was rarely shown with such emotional weight, Cabanel challenged the codes of artistic decorum, granting the angel a sensuality that humanizes him. That decision gave rise to diverse interpretations, from those that saw in the painting a reflection on the vanity of pride to those that considered it an allegory of the artist himself, rebellious before the established norms of academic art. Some later critics have suggested that the fallen angel could represent Cabanel's own spirit, aware of his talent, but also of the risk of straying from the limits imposed by tradition. Over time, the interpretation of the fallen angel has changed. In the 19th century, it was read as a moral warning against rebellion and pride. In the 20th century, it began to be seen as a symbol of alienation and melancholy, the portrait of a soul that has discovered itself separated from the whole. In the 21st century, however, the contemporary gaze vindicates it as a figure of resistance, a being who, despite his fall, preserves his beauty, his fire, and his dignity. The painting is no longer contemplated as a story of condemnation, but as a declaration of inner freedom. Cabanel's angel does not beg, does not repent, does not kneel. He weeps, yes, but he maintains the pride of one who does not submit. He is a symbol of humanity itself, capable of defying heaven and of weeping at the same time for what it loses. Although there are no records of major restorations, the work has been preserved with extreme care at the Musée Fabre, since the artist's brother donated it after his death in 1889. There, under soft lighting that accentuates the paleness of the body and the moist shine of the tear, the fallen angel continues to exert its magnetism on visitors. Each generation contemplates it differently, but all recognize in it something universal, the moment when perfection breaks and reveals its fragility. There is no music, no fire, no struggle, only a suspended instant where silence weighs more than any word. More than a religious painting, The Fallen Angel is a metaphysical meditation on beauty, pain, and the loss of meaning. Cabanel does not describe a biblical scene, but a state of the soul, the awareness of the being who has looked at light too closely and has fallen for desiring to possess it. In his angel dwells the essential contradiction of existence, infinite aspiration and inevitable fall. The viewer, in looking at him, does not see a divine punishment, but his own reflection, the struggle between ambition and humility, between the desire to rise and the reality that keeps one bound to earth. That ambiguity is what keeps the work alive more than a century and a half after its creation. Thus, the angel's tear continues to shine like a jewel of pain suspended in time. It is the last vestige of light of one who was expelled from paradise, and at the same time the first spark of a new consciousness. The fallen angel not only shows the fall from heaven, but the birth of individuality, the moment when a being ceases to obey and begins to feel for himself. For that reason, Cabanel's painting transcends theology and becomes pure philosophy, visual poetry about the human condition. Because, at bottom, we are all that angel who once wanted to fly higher than light and ended up discovering that the true hell is not in fire, but in the memory of what is lost. The luminous background where other angels move away toward heaven is an open wound in the composition. It represents the world from which the protagonist has been expelled, the realm of obedience and purity. In front of it, the fallen angel is the first individual, the first who chooses. In that sense, his rebellion is not only a fault, but a birth. Cabanel, without declaring it openly, paints the moment when freedom is born from rupture. This fallen angel is not the medieval demon who inspires terror. He is a being of perfect beauty, who pays the price for having thought for himself. His posture is one of defeat, but his gaze heralds resistance. Thus, the painting becomes a reflection on the value and the punishment of autonomy, on the melancholy of one who has seen the face of truth and cannot close his eyes again. The artist achieves that balance thanks to his mastery of chiaroscuro. Light caresses the angel's body softly, as if heaven still claimed him, while the shadows of his wings envelop him in the promise of the abyss. That fusion of light and darkness becomes a metaphor for human nature, half spiritual, half earthly, condemned to belong completely to neither of the two realms. The chromatic palette, in which the warm tones of the skin contrast with the cool tones of the background, accentuates that inner tension. Every centimeter of the work is executed with an almost mystical precision. The veins that course through the arms, the moist shine of the eyes, the texture of the feathers, Cabanel does not seek realism, but transcendence. His technique, impeccable to the point of obsession, serves as a vehicle for the invisible. In the context of the 19th century, this representation proved profoundly provocative. In a France dominated by Catholicism and by a rigid morality, to show Lucifer not as a monster, but as a young man of tragic beauty, was almost a theological challenge. Conservative critics saw in the work a dangerous humanization of evil, an exaltation of the pride that had led to perdition. But that very audacity attracted the admiration of younger artists, who saw in Cabanel's angel a symbol of their own struggle against the norms of academic art. In fact, the fallen angel anticipates the symbolist and decadent sensibility that would dominate the final decades of the century. The angel is no longer a religious figure, but a metaphor for the artist, misunderstood, removed from the heaven of recognition, condemned to the solitude of his genius. The psychological impact of the work lies in its silence. There are no cries, no violent gestures, no outward drama. Everything occurs inside the character. It is a painting that stops time at the exact moment when the soul understands its destiny. The viewer, in contemplating it, feels an immediate empathy. We have all known that instant in which the light recedes and one is left alone with one's thoughts. That is why the fallen angel does not age. It does not depend on its historical context, because it speaks of an eternal emotion, that of having lost something we love for following what we believe. In that moist gaze is hidden the reflection of every human being who has chosen to think, even if the price is solitude. The hidden symbolism of the painting has inspired countless interpretations. Some scholars observe that the wings blackened only at the tips allude to a partial corruption, not total, suggesting that the angel's purity has not been completely extinguished. Others point out that the gesture of covering his face with the right arm evokes both modesty and shame, but also the pride of one who does not want to be seen in his vulnerability. The body, illuminated with an almost divine clarity, seems to say that evil does not reside in form but in intention. Cabanel thus introduces a moral paradox. The angel has fallen, but he remains beautiful. He has disobeyed, but he preserves light within him. That ambiguity disconcerts, for it destroys the boundary between virtue and sin, and raises a question that remains uncomfortable. Is rebellion a condemnation or an evolution? Over the years, the fallen angel has gone from being seen as a moral warning to being considered a hymn to consciousness. In modern studies of iconography, the painting is interpreted as an allegory of awakening. Lucifer, whose name means bearer of light, embodies the knowledge that defies obedience. In that sense, Cabanel does not paint a fall, but a revelation. The fire that burns in the angel's eyes is not infernal, it is intellectual. It is the spark of one who has seen too much, of one who has understood that divine perfection does not admit the imperfection of free thought. That contemporary reading returns to the painting in astonishing relevance. The angel is no longer an enemy of God, but the personification of the modern human being, torn between the longing for transcendence and the impossibility of attaining it. The composition of the work reinforces this philosophical reading. The figure occupies the exact center of the canvas, capturing all the viewer's attention. But the space surrounding it, the heaven that recedes, the inert stone, the empty horizon, creates a sensation of absolute isolation. Cabanel uses symmetry as a psychological resource. The more balanced the form appears, the more we feel the desolation of the content. There is no narrative behind. There are no witnesses to the punishment, only the angel and his silence. That monumental solitude turns the painting into a kind of inner mirror. To look at it is to confront our own conscience, the memory of our falls, and the tragic beauty of our errors. In aesthetic terms, the fallen angel marks an intermediate point between the neoclassical tradition and the spirituality of symbolism. The influence of Raphael and Michelangelo is evident in the anatomy and the composition, but the melancholic tone and the emotional intensity anticipate the work of artists such as Bouguereau, Redon, or even Gustave Moreau. Cabanel manages to unite the precision of academic art with a poetic charge that brings him closer to mysticism than to reason. His angel does not belong to the past, it belongs to the eternal present of the human soul. That capacity to cross time, is what makes the work continue to move today. Every visitor who pauses before the canvas feels something different. Some perceive compassion, others defiance, others sadness, but all agree on one impression: the angel seems alive. His gaze does not belong to the 19th century, nor to the Bible. It belongs to us. It is the gaze of the being who loved light so much that he dared to fall for it. Cabanel, without knowing it, painted the face of modern consciousness, luminous, proud, broken, yet still capable of weeping for what is lost. And so Cabanel's angel remains in his eternal exile, motionless and aware, trapped on the border between grace and the fall. His perfect body continues to be a ruined temple, a beauty that no longer belongs to heaven, but does not corrupt itself on earth either. It is the image of the human soul in its purest form, radiant and wounded, proud and fragile, condemned to remember what it was. In that young face that weeps without surrender is found the story of every creature that has loved light enough to lose it. Cabanel did not paint a demon, he painted the consciousness of modern man, a being who seeks to understand himself, who defies the divine without being able to stop longing for it, who weeps for his loss, but does not renounce his freedom. The fallen angel is the metaphor of the mind that awakens, of the spirit that prefers the pain of knowing over the peace of ignorance. For this reason, in contemplating it, one does not see punishment but revelation. In its tear there is more truth than in 1,000 sermons, and in its silence resounds the voice of all those who at some time fell in order to discover who they were. That is the greatness of Cabanel's work. It not only portrays the fall of an angel, but the elevation of the human soul through knowledge and suffering. Its light does not go out, it transforms, and its beauty does not die, it becomes eternal, because in the solitude of that defeated being burns the fire that reminds us that even in the fall, we remain made of light.